Coming up on Growing Indoors with the Eco Garden House, we're going to harvest more tomatoes, which we are excited about, as well as it's time to talk about feeding the plants that we have in our system. And we're doing a little thinning on our zucchini plant. All that coming up right now. Sponsored by Eco Garden House. At last, an indoor greenhouse equipped with complete, easy lighting and watering systems. You can grow perfect organic produce and plants at your home all year round. Grow 24/7, 365. You now have no excuses. Welcome to Growing Indoors with the Eco Garden House. I'm Joy Baird. First thing we got to do is harvest some more of our tomatoes, and then we can get to the next step, which is feeding our tomatoes and our peppers. And we've got our zucchini that have come up from a previous episode. We've got a number of cherry yellow plum tomatoes there in the back there, as well as we have more flowers forming. And we have another black crim that is ready to be harvested. I'm just going to twist it off. There you go. Another black crim. That one's even better than the previous one because this is no blemishes, no cracks, and very nice. So I'm going to harvest the rest of these cherry ones, and then we'll talk about different options you have when feeding your plants in the Eco Garden House. So I've harvested a good amount of cherry, and these are red Romas, and the black crim. Now another thing you want to be aware of is the health and well-being of your tomato plants. Typically when you grow outdoors, you would cage these, but in here we're not caging them because we can have a little more control over the environment as well as the plants. So we've got a number of clusters here on which tomato? This would be the cherry tomato now. A number of clusters there, and more flowers and more flowers and more flowers. Now when you do see, and these plants will go through this, outdoors, indoors, either in any situation, you're going to have some dieback. And you can just go ahead and just trim it off. And it's just natural occurrences. Maybe you have a disease, a little bit of a disease, but you just want to try to groom the plant the best you can just to limit the amount of potential problems that you might face. And even if the plant is all green and healthy, you can still trim it back a little bit to control the shape and well-being of it. So when it comes to whether you're growing tomatoes or peppers or zucchini or kale or any of these items and others, we have to feed those plants with a fertilizer. Now, you can do, with our situation, we have certified leaf compost, which is a certified professional potting soil, which has a certain amount of actual leaf compost incorporated in it, as well as a slow-release fertilizer. There's two types of fertilizers essentially out there, a liquid fertilizer and a granular fertilizer, synthetic and all natural or organic. What you want to choose here is what we're going to choose, and you can do the research on what you would want to use in your Eco Garden House, is we're going to use a liquid fertilizer. Liquid fertilizer, an organic variety liquid fertilizer. What a liquid fertilizer essentially is, it's equated to about like getting an IV immediately into the plant's available uptake and feeding the plant. Granular fertilizers typically are a slow-release fertilizer, and with the microbiology in the soil, as well as natural rainfall, it helps dissolve and break down and allow the plant to pick up that nutrients over a duration period of time. So we've got a liquid fertilizer, and we follow the applicational rate on the back of the bottle, and this is a feed that you can do every 2 to 4 weeks. And you want to feed it at the base of the plant. Now, with the Eco Garden House, we have a 33-gallon reservoir that we could utilize in this application. I would recommend not doing that for a couple of reasons. One, the specific requirements is per so many gallons. With this, it's so many capfuls per 1 gallon of fertilizer, and you want to do that every 2 to 4 weeks. If you would incorporate that into the actual reservoir, you're going to have that fertilizer or that synthetic fertilizer, that chemical, setting in there, and it's not going to do any good, and it actually could create more problems than it will benefit the plants. Now, if you had a granular fertilizer, it would take a long time to break down in the Eco Garden house because there's a minimal amount of biology in the soil, as well as there's not rainfall, but we do have irrigation. You could use a composted tea bag. This is a fertilizer of a 464, and you steep it in a gallon of water overnight and you water it, and it feeds the plants that way. Again, you don't want to incorporate this into the actual reservoir. This is actual compost, a compost tea, and there is an aroma that comes with it that is good for the plants. But if you have this in a house, a basement, a garage, there's going to be an aroma that will essentially come from your reservoir. In addition, this feeds off of the oxygen in the water, and that's how this all breaks down. The compost tea steeps, and it feeds off the microbial life in the water. So once the oxygen is depleted in the water in the reservoir, it's going to go the opposite direction. It's going to start stinking. So do it as is recommended on the back of any fertilizer or compost tea bags. Simply do it manually. Don't use the water reservoir. The water reservoir is simply to keep the plants hydrated as you would a normal irrigation system. So with this, we're just going to give each plant what we feel is a cup or 2 cups of water, enough to allow the roots to pick it up and feed the plant that way. Now you really want to avoid, you don't want to just broadcast this all over the plant because it's not going to do the leaves any good or the fruit any good. You want to get it at the base and try to avoid as much splash up as you can. And then we're just going to go through and water all of them. And you can utilize this fertilizer or a liquid fertilizer or a compost tea on any of your plants in your Eco Garden house. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to thin out our zucchini plants. We planted them an episode ago. The zucchini, in perfect conditions, will get 24 to 36 inches tall and that distance wide as well. But we're going to confine it and control it indoors here so we can benefit from the plant. And it takes 57 days to reach a fruiting state from seed. So we've got 2 here, and the mirror has nothing to do with the health or growth capabilities of any of the plants in the Eco Garden house. It's simply so you can see more of what I'm doing here. We've got 4 plants that have come up out of the 6 seeds that we have planted. This is the healthiest one. So I'm simply going to take my pruner shears and just snip off the other 3. You don't want to pull them up, especially that one there, because it will disturb the roots of the one that's growing. So we have fed that with the fertilizer. We can get rid of these plant pieces. And then as this one grows, you can see it's got true leaves here. These smaller leaves are what comes off out of the first emerging leaves. And then these are the true leaves that begin to grow. And while looking at that, I see I have a chocolate pepper that is ready to harvest. That is not that large, but this is a cherry chocolate heirloom variety pepper. And when it turns that purplish chocolate color, it's ready to harvest regardless of the size that it really is. So we got that done. We want to look at the plants over on the other side here. And we want to especially look at our cucumber plant because we have it growing in the center here in I believe it's a 20-gallon grow bag. We have basil in here as well as the cucumber. What you can see here is the cucumber tentacles there are latching on to the fan cord. And we want to just that's fine like that because I can hang some strings down, that's what I'll do, to allow this to grab onto to grow vertical. But we want to make sure if you're growing plants that are going to climb up, and we have a very nice basil plant here as well, and a baby cucumber plant, or baby cucumber, that they're not going to grow over top of the actual exhaust fan, because then that's going to limit the airflow that the Eco Garden house is getting through, and that's going to really hurt the production of a lot of plants. As well in the back here we have our sweet potato that we planted. We got 3 plants and we have 1 that's crawling up the cord here as well. So those have really taken good growth. And we've backed the water off of everything just for a time being because you want to control the water. You don't want to have too much water in the Eco Garden house because then the plants are not going to grow as good. And if you have very little water, they're going to not grow as good as well. So there's a balance you have to keep. So things are going very well in the Eco Garden house with the tomatoes and the peppers and with the addition of the zucchini plant. Thanks for joining me. Join me again next time for more growing in the Eco Garden house.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.